Sound speeds. And ever since I started this YouTube channel 3 years ago, people have been asking me one question over and over again. How do you process your audio for your videos here on YouTube? Until now, I have been very quiet about that, even though I've hinted at it from time to time, maybe on a live stream. However, I'm going to now reveal what I do for this video. And I'm going to do so in candid mode on my computer where I can speak freely and explain everything, stutters and everything. Before we get going, let me say this. The way I process my sound here on YouTube is totally different than anything I would do in the real world, and there's a very specific reason for it. On YouTube, many people that watch videos watch them on their tablets, on their phones, on their computer speakers, and not actually doing critical listening. Now, you could argue that people on a sound channel would be doing critical listening, but believe it or not, a lot of people don't, unless you're doing a comparison between a few microphones, or unless you're doing a review of an audio product. But for most of my videos, like the presentation videos you see me do, where I'm standing up and I'm a talking head, simply talking about something educational, in those videos, it's more important for people to hear me clearly at the same level. So much of my processing is designed accordingly for that. After I record all of my audio, I import those files into Reaper. And if I'm doing a comparison between microphones, I'm going to start with that. I will start by opening up my files and simply go to Item, Processing, and Normalize. Now, considering that I clap and do a whole bunch of sync things like this little point right here, and at the very beginning, you're going to see a lot of little loud spikes, those kind of things are going to mean that I'm not bringing it up a whole lot simply by hitting normalize on it. It's normalizing to those claps, not to my actual voice, and I'm not going to raise up the audio any more than that just yet. Now, if I'm comparing two different microphones or doing anything of the sort, then what I'm going to do is the only kind of processing that I will do, rather, is by opening up the Waves loudness meter, and I will bring it up in mono. And that's just for every single channel. And simply what I will do is play my audio, and then I will watch the meters and adjust them to be the exact same, right around negative 24 dB LKFS. Double the weight that you're holding. And that's not even to mention... Right there, you see that it does come up as a long term and a short term. But what I'm going to be looking for is right in here, these two levels right here. Double the weight that you're holding. And that's not even to mention. So you see only 6 ounces of weight when extended. So you see only 6 ounces of weight when extended out only a few feet is enough. You see how many times I glitch and make errors and that kind of thing? That is the typical SoundSpeed's way. It is the way. So I'm going to go to Item Processing. Actually, rather, I'm going to go to Take, and I'm going to add a volume envelope. And what I will usually do is aim for the momentary to be negative 24 LKFS. And as long as my true peak does not exceed like around negative 6 dB, I'm going to call that pretty good. So I'll slowly bring this up accordingly. And I may end up having to stretch this down just to do the fine tuning. And if I'm comparing two different audio sources, I will grab an area of it that might be like this area here is around 45 seconds long. And I will level match both of them at the same time while watching the meters and adjusting them to be the exact same, like this. Double the weight that you're holding. And that's not even to mention... So you see only 6 ounces of weight when extended. So yeah, that's going up. Only 6 ounces of weight when extended out only a few feet is enough to make it weigh a few pounds. Go out a few. So you see only a few ounces of weight. So you see only 6 ounces of weight is enough to make it weigh. Now, this isn't a very long segment. Thank goodness, right? I would actually find an area where I'm not glitching and messing up so many times, and that would give me a much better reading. Usually one of my successful takes, where I'll speak for a good 20 or 30 seconds, that's what I'll take and go over and over again, because that's going to be representative of my regular volume and how I'm speaking the entire video. And then from there, I will go ahead and process those bits of audio. But for this, I don't normally do it in my regular presentation videos this way. So I'm going to go ahead, and if I go over here, I'm going to basically undo my normalization. Oops, that's not it. It's there. So, and I didn't even do it again. There. All right, now we're reset. So now we're starting at ground zero, bare bones basic. Now here's what I will do in my processing. At the very beginning, whenever I'm recording my videos, I will start by clapping 3 times, and then I will do an over-dramatic breath in. And the reason I do that is because when I hold my breath, that is my indicator that should be my noise floor. Whatever the noise floor is in my environment is what I'm going to be zeroing out. And I'll show you exactly how I do it. Now, I'll start this sample right here. Whatever that is, I'll take a good few, 3 or 4 seconds of it, and then I will go into my effects chain, and I'm going to be using, I don't need this anymore, I'm going to be using refer. Now, what refer normally does is it would come up in EQ mode by default, but I put it in subtraction mode, and then I click on the automatically build noise profile enabled during noise. So what I'm doing now is playing the audio in, and it's building a noise profile, and it's not flawless. If I bring up the audio right now and let you just listen to this, check it out. Hear all those little bitty artifacts? Those artifacts are going to be there in the actual sound itself if I let it, but I'm not going to allow that to happen. What I'd use is the Noise Suppressor 1, which is a very inexpensive plugin from Waves. And I simply hit that into the on position and leave it all the way down. I don't bring it up at all. I leave it all the way down. And that is enough to knock out those little bitty low elements in the background. And so when I hit play over one of my regular pieces, over actors' heads, then ha, you are mistaken. And what? You don't hear any background noise when I go quiet. Now, I know a lot of people get creeped out if there's no background noise, but since my videos are pretty tight and I'm speaking nonstop with very little pauses, you don't really notice that. Now, the reasoning for that may not be apparent, but it's going to be in a moment, because what I'm going to do next is go into Real EQ, and if you notice, I have an E100 default. Since I'm normally about a foot or so away from my microphone, maybe even a little bit farther away, like 14 inches, it's not giving all the bass in my voice that would normally be there. It starts to fall off the farther you are. Now, I like the vintage CAD Equitech E100 because it's very flat. And I like my voice to sound pretty natural, even though I have a very high-pitched noise, very high-pitched voice by nature. Noise is probably more accurate for me. Now, when I engage the EQ, notice I'm boosting up the low frequencies ever so slightly, and that's just because it needs to compensate for the air and distance off the mic. And that is right there, accurate representation of how I sound. So on this channel, I don't like to embellish my voice. I don't want it sounding like I'm, radio-ish. I don't want it sounding anything different than me, the real me. If you saw me in person and met me, this is the way I would actually sound on this video. Not now because I have a microphone in my face, which you know I don't like. However, when I do my normal presentation videos, that's the way I normally sound. And this is the EQ curve that I typically add simply because it sounds normal to me. From there, I add a simple de-esser, which my settings are very, very bare bones and basic. I simply just dialed it in on about the 4K mark. And you may say that's not really where you should be using a de-esser and how you should be using a de-esser. But in all honesty, I don't care. To me, from playing around, I think that these settings right here on the screen work well for my voice, and I've played around with them. I've gone wider on the threshold. I've gone, wider on the bandwidth and extended the octave a little bit wider. But this works pretty well for me, and I don't do a whole lot of it. So there you go. From there, I do add a compressor. Now, I know a lot of people say don't use compressors on things, but I do, and here's why. On YouTube, if you're watching on your phone, you don't want to have to constantly adjust your level up and down. So if I compress it here, it normally does a pretty good job. And these are the settings that I normally have used and I've dialed in on. So basically, after I get my normaled out, my audio that you heard zeroed out based on that, I will simply untick this box right here, which unbuilds the noise profile, and then I'll go click, 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 and then I'll listen to it. If there's a part in my video where I get extremely loud, like when I do a review and I scream at the top of my lungs or something like that, if I am doing that through my E100 and not through the microphones I'm testing, in that case, then I will do what I call the master limiter. And this is more of a brick wall type setting where nothing is going to go higher than this one particular level and it's going to knock down. So I've even called it brick wall there. Now, again, you may look at these settings and say, that's not exactly what a brick wall level is. Okay, that's fine. These settings are what I've dialed in on as I feel works well for me. My voice is higher than a lot of male voices and even some female voices. One of my daughters, who's 12, has a deeper voice than I do. They'll tell you something, right? But most of the time, I don't use the master limiter. I'm going to simply run it the way it is. If I need to do any more adjustments to it, I will tweak them accordingly. But for the most part, these are the settings I run with. And then I will go in here and process my audio. Now, when I do the render of my audio, I'm simply going to do it at 48K, mono, WAV file, 24-bit, and then this keeps changing, but what I normally go to is actually high quality, not extremely high quality, because YouTube is going to take it down a notch anyway. YouTube audio is not high fidelity. So really, in all honesty, comparing microphones is not that easy to do on YouTube if you're listening for all the little bitty, tiny little idiosyncrasies between them, because YouTube is not high enough quality to do that. But you can usually get pretty close. And for these settings, this is going to be just fine for me. So I'll go ahead and render it out, usually calling it something like, I'll just call this thing audio settings, and then I will save this into a folder that I will call audio settings. Okay, once I have everything set up, I will hit render one file. And then I wait a couple of minutes for the file to be done. And I'm not going to do anything until it's done because it doesn't take all that long, in all honesty. Now, this whole video in the audio that this is actually going along with is an hour and about 24 minutes long or so. So it may take a little while to process all my audio, but you're going to watch on the meters. It's never going to exceed like the 0 dB mark. It's never going to clip. Even when I do clap and stuff, it's never going to exceed that. And if it does, it's going to be for one of those real quick moments that I don't care about. Like when I cough, one of these little bitty spikes right here. And in all honesty, those shouldn't even really peak the meters. Now that the audio is done processing, you can see it never once clipped during that entire process of 4 minutes long. So now I'm going to go ahead and close everything up because we know we got our audio the way we need it to be, with the exception of normalizing, or rather in this case, leveling. Now, I use Auphonics noise leveling software and not the online version. I actually paid for it and registered it because I want to be able to import in an audio file just like this on my computer. Now, the advantage of this particular leveling software is that it's going to automatically ride the volume so that my audience doesn't have to. If you listen to my audio, all you have to do is just hit play on it, and I'm going to speak the same loudness the same exact time. You don't have to worry about me suddenly getting loud or overly quiet. You couldn't hear what I have to say because it's always going to be level to the exact same level, and you don't have to adjust your volume control. Now, you may look at that and say, that's kind of drastic. I mean, you've already normalized it, and you've compressed it, and you've done everything else. True. But in the years I've been doing sound speeds, I've probably received only a handful of complaints that my audio doesn't sound good, but I've received a lot of people saying, I love being able to just turn your channel on and not have to worry about messing with my audio level. And most of the time, no news is good news, right? So there's probably a whole bunch of other people that appreciate what I do without actually saying it. Now, keep in mind, this is only for my presentation videos. I don't do this for my regular videos that are like comparisons of microphones or any of my reviews, because in that case, I want my audio to be pristine, clear, and untouched. So I don't do any processing, including noise removal or anything like that. But in doing so, when I process out my audio and make sure that it's leveled, I also should mention that not always does the WLM plugin that I used, it doesn't work perfectly. Sometimes I have to adjust by ear too, because one microphone may be a little bit more bassy than a higher pitched one. And in order for it to sound right, it's got to sound right. It's got to maybe adjust one up and down just a little bit, because the energy in deeper sounds is different than those in mids and highs. So in order for it to sound level to your ear, you might have to play with the levels ever so slightly more. Otherwise, you're not going to get an accurate measurement out of it. Now, that said, once I import the audio into my video program, if it's low or if it's too high, then I will bring up or down my levels exactly the same amount with any of the samples that I've recorded. And by doing that, I can assure that my audio is going to be as good as possible for my reviews. But getting back to this, because now I'm in an Auphonic leveler. Now, what I will set this to is -20 LUFS. And the reason I do that is because YouTube is -16 LUFS. And if I do it at -20, it gives me a little bit more headroom to play with in my post-editing program for videos. And I will go ahead and hit audio processing. I'm not going to put on adaptive leveler. I'm not going to put on high pass filter or hum and noise removal. None of that. Hit process. And now I will watch it do its magic for a good minute or so. And at the end of it, it's going to put the results of the input file and the output file on the screen. And it's going to tell me what it basically did and how the levels changed. Now, there is a free version you can use online if you want to at least give it a try, and I think it's good for 1 or 2 hours of sound per month, maybe, but I went ahead and registered this software because it allows me to use it on my computer for however long I want to do my sound for, and it doesn't really matter because it processes it on my computer and not online. I'm sure it's probably faster too by doing it that way. And so here we are, nearly done with this audio processing now, and it is going to also be based on my settings up here, 24-bit 48K. And the reason I do that is, well, check out that video if you don't understand the reason why I have these particular settings. Now, if I'm doing audio only, I might change it up a little bit. But then if I'm doing audio only, most likely I'm not going to be doing auphonic noise leveling, am I? Or the audio leveling, because I'm probably not going to be doing this the same way as I would for YouTube. YouTube is a little bit of a different creature because it sounds non-high fidelity. Okay, it just popped up. The file that I imported into it had a loudness average of negative 28.46 LUFS. The output file is at exactly negative 20 LUFS with a peak level of negative 1 dB, so it's not going to exceed 0, which is good. These are the rest of the stats here. It momentarily is a little bit louder. Maximum short turn is actually closer to negative 13.89, but if it happens to be too loud for YouTube, YouTube will bring it back up, and that will mean that YouTube is at least happy with it. But you can see this whole entire file, the file size and everything remained about the same. And from here, I will import this into my video software, and then my audio is completely done. All I have to do is synchronize it to my video, and I'm good to go. So although too aggressive for the real world, it's ideal for me and my channel on YouTube when I'm doing talking head educational type content. If I'm doing my reviews, as I keep saying, I'm going to do it differently. But that's very little of what I actually do on this channel. I don't normally do a whole lot of reviews or comparisons in sound. I'm an educator. I teach a lot of stuff. Sure, I review stuff too, but most of it's education. So thank you for tuning into this episode of Sound Speeds, and be sure to tune in the future if you'd like some more educational type stuff and for sound advice. Have a question you'd like answered or want to add something? Be sure to write it in the comment section down below. You can also make a suggestion for future topics of discussion. Again, comment section down below, or you can email me at soundspeeds@yahoo.com. Be sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you won't miss out on future sound advice.